at what point in time for a man that is told to suck it up, be a man, if you're not being pushed necessarily by somebody into self-discovery, at what point in time does the switch flip to start asking big questions of yourself? Ask those deep, soul-searching questions, which is scary.
Today's guest is my dear friend, Juan Huerta, a second-generation Hispanic American, has grown up and lived his adult life in his hometown, Illinois. Is married and a father of 4. His trade is carpenter. He is pushing his calling as a men's health coach. One is founder and coach at 1417 Men's Masterclass. He is also host of the podcast by the same name. He says that while the subjects he teaches are universal to everyone, his main mission is focusing towards helping men manage their hearts and minds to become more wholehearted humans. Welcome, Juan.
Thank you so much, Anita. I'm glad to be here. This is fantastic. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Thank you. What is one of the most courageous things you've done? And knowing your story, I know you've done several. So what would you say is one of the most courageous things you've done?
I think there's, like you said, there's several. I think one of the ones that hits me the most, and the reason why I do what I do as a men's life coach, is to opening up, opening up my emotions and my heart to talk more freely about it. Guys, men, not just here in the US, but all over the world, are just generationally not encouraged to do so. So the most courageous thing for me is to open up and reveal who I am in my heart and my mind. So that's over the past few years of trying to work on that. That's probably the most courageous thing, to be vulnerable like that.
Yeah, I can definitely understand why men don't, though. And more, it's slowly getting there. So that's a fantastic journey to be going on.
Yeah. It's a slow burn. But just trying to lend my voice to encourage other men to do that. And hopefully as more voices, grow around that, it becomes a movement in of itself.
Excellent. You grew up in an artistic family. Your mom was a dancer and your dad was a singer. Mm-hmm. Did you want to follow the arts?
Absolutely. I actually grew up in the dance studio. My mom was the dance teacher. So where other kids my age were taking karate or taekwondo, I was doing pirouettes. So yeah, and that kind of took me in a lot of different directions too, because as a guy that could dance, going to high school, somebody, in the theater department finds that, you just get snagged and automatically thrown in to the school musical. So yeah, that was my full intent, was to pursue a career in the arts. I got married and had kids, and I decided, well, I haven't really established myself in that yet. And I really need a steady job right now to take care of my family. So that just went on the back burner. May get back around there someday, who knows? But yeah, I still sing to this day. And every now and then, when time allows, I'll do a community theater show. But yeah, it was definitely in my sights at one point in time. I had my eyes on Broadway.
Oh, wow. Lovely.
Yeah.
So what led you to your journey of personal development then? Because there's like many miles away from the arts.
It is. I've always been a fairly soft-hearted person. My dad loved to tell stories about his children to other people that would listen, especially humorous ones. So, growing up, I was always the very, I've got large, expressive eyes, and my dad would call them cow eyes because they're just so big. but I was always wearing my heart on my sleeve. So my dad would always tell a story that I was the one of the kids that could never lie because my face would tell the story. I was just too emotional. He'd catch me out on something that I did, and I would, just have this expression like, yeah, he knew, where my other siblings were like, they could pull off the lie to get out of trouble. Me, it was just all over my face. So getting into a area of personal growth or personal development, and coming from an artistic family, was not that far from where I was anyway, and just being an emotional person. Yes, as a guy, we push that stuff down, but there's still that buried in me. So as life happens, and I think for me, it's tricky, because at what point in time for a man that is told to suck it up, be a man, at what point in time does if you're not being pushed necessarily by somebody into self-discovery, at what point in time does the switch flip to start asking big questions of yourself, which is something that I think not only men need to do, but everybody needs to do. You need to ask those deep soul-searching questions, which is scary. For me, that was some life events, about 7 years. I'm 45. About 7 years ago, as I hate to say it, I'm approaching middle age, but about 7 years ago, as I start to get older, and I have kids, and I'm starting to ask questions of what I'm doing with work and what I'm doing with life, and how am I doing better for my family and my wife and my kids, and is this enough? And at some point in time, there's something that starts to trigger those questions, and you start to think about that. So in my mid to late 30s, I'm starting to think about that. I'm doing the same thing day after day, and is this enough? And that starts to snowball some questions, and I start reading and watching, YouTube, TED Talks and inspirational videos, and anything I can read or get my hands on. And then, several years ago, had some serious life events that really pushed the envelope and pushed me to take that step and go, okay, this is important. This can't be ignored. So it was about a 7-year process.
We all come to situations in our life where they do change us and I know you were saying you've had a lot of loss in your life. How does one cope and manage and deal with a situation like, I know your brother was lost to gun violence.
Yes.
That's so tragic. I mean, it's a terrible situation to be in. And how does one deal with that?
Sometimes not well. At that time when we lost my brother, I had this is of course pre-pandemic. This was 2019, January of 2019. I had a gym membership, so I threw myself into working out, and sometimes that's good therapy. That's good to do. I definitely had some good times on the elliptical machine where I'm sweating and nobody can see the tears mixed with the sweat as I'm just trying to cope. But that really wasn't enough. I wasn't doing some internal work. I was just doing some physical things to try and release tension and emotion. But I hate to say that going to the gym wasn't a healthy thing, because I was, getting in a workout and getting rid of some of that stress in my body, but, I wasn't dealing with it in a great way. I wasn't really asking hard questions as I've had been. I was just letting the grief compound, which then over several other losses led to other, bad, coping mechanisms, if you will. I was just not dealing with it well, because I was just, those huge emotions were just so hard to process. So at the beginning, I was doing physical things to try and cope with the tension in my body, but I really wasn't doing the heart things. So sometimes it doesn't start off well, but getting help and having something that realigns you or smacks you upside the head with a 2x4 to really go, hey, what are you doing? Come on, let's focus. Let's, get to the bottom of this. Let's get to the heart of it. So at the beginning, I wasn't coping with it well. Lost a couple other family members, and that kind of compounded until I had a aha moment. So, I lost in 2019, lost my brother, January of 2019. Later on that year, May of 2019, I lost my brother-in-law to cancer, which was hard. He was a great guy. We loved him a lot. In that particular instance, my heart definitely hurt more for my nieces who lost their father. So that was just hard one to sit with other people going through extreme grief. I was familiar with it because I just recently lost a sibling. I could sit with them and know a bit of that pain because, losing someone close to me. And then, we get into the pandemic in 2020, and my father, who was a very healthy man, we did projects together. Me being a carpenter, he'd always call on me to come over and, hey, let's do this project. I want to do this to my house. And so, I jump in, bring tools over, and we'd get to it. So he was a very healthy guy. I think it was late June, almost July of 2020. He contracts COVID. And it wasn't more than probably 6 or 7 days later, he's on a ventilator. He's in the hospital on the ventilator for 11 days or so. And in that time, it's amazing how quick something can ravage your body. He comes out just a weak version of himself. His body's just been through it. So we get him back in beginning of November of 2020, around Thanksgiving of 2020. So we had him back maybe 3.5 weeks, and he's hospitalized again.
Okay.
And the doctor just gives him, a prognosis that, it's never going to get better. You'll get better, you'll get worse, you'll take one step forward and you'll take 10 steps back. And it'll happen every time. It's just going to keep happening over and over. And so my father made the difficult decision that he was just done. So he came home on hospice and passed in January of 2021. So that was the one that really just cracked me. That was my dad. After losing my brother in 2019, my wife and I had made the decision to really double down our efforts to, as much as we've been busy in the past and we've got our kids and we've got this and that, we doubled down our efforts that we wanted to spend as much time with family as possible. So we were over at my parents' house almost every weekend. We didn't want to miss out on any more time with loved ones. So we made the decision, hey, anytime that we can be with our family, we're going to be with our family. So from 2019 to the time that my dad passed, we had spent more time with them because we intentionally were like, we don't want anything else to happen where we say, I wish I had spent more time with my family. So we spent a lot more time with the family. Projects or just cooking out or having dinner or just sitting and chatting and taking, some coffee over there and sitting with them. So the loss of my dad was huge, especially, to this pandemic. And I think one of the most difficult things about it was just the way that people over here in America treated the pandemic. You've got a definite clear division on who was taking it seriously and who was interested in other agendas. So add that onto the loss of my dad, where you're going, hey, people are losing loved ones. So that just made it even worse. Through that, you know, happening, we're all isolated at home.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing a lot more drinking. You know, I'm not drunk all the time, but I'm definitely drinking heavier than I ever have prior to the pandemic. You know, I was occasionally a social drinker. I don't tolerate alcohol greatly anyway, so it messes with my system. But I just like, hey, we're at home. We're gonna cook out, and I'm just gonna have a beer, and then I'll have a beer later on today. And you know what? Alcohol was on sale. I'm just gonna buy that. We'll have it at the house. And you know, hey, it's midday. I don't really have anything that I'm doing. Let me just take a shot of this. You know, just not healthy. You know, that's just another coping, definitely a unhealthy coping mechanism. So I was turning to some heavier for me alcohol use, which was not, again, the way to deal with a heavy emotion. Instead of asking the questions and doing the heart work, I was just using something external to cope with the loss. It wasn't until we were watching a TV show that I had my aha moment, which is kind of funny. I know, you know, people kind of look down upon TV sometimes as something that's life changing or life altering. But whether, you know, a good writer is a good writer, a good actor is a good actor, and whether it's, you know, a great poet that's been published or whatever, a good writing is still good writing. And I think a good writer, if they write for television, is one that can still take life and filter it into something that is moving. And that's why we like television, you know, coming from that artistic background that I do. You watch these shows that move you because the actors have acted out something that connects you to life that you feel, and a writer has written words that have just taken your view of life and just open it up for you, and you're like, oh my God, that's me. So I was watching this show, WandaVision. I love Marvel movies. I think a lot of people love superhero movies. So I was watching that, and the main character Wanda had lost her brother in a great battle in one of the Marvel movies. And the character of Vision is sitting with her as she's dealing with the loss of her brother and still trying to cope with that grief, and failing, and just feeling like she can't find hope. And Vision has this line where he looks at her after a moment of reflection. He looks at her and he says, "But what is grief, if not love persevering?" I went, I'm going to tear up now thinking about it. My breath just left my body. It reframed in an instant what my mind was thinking. My mind was just thinking this grief is something that's going to sit in my heart, and it's just pain and suffering and misery. But what is grief if not love persevering? It's the love that you have for that person that just lives on in you. Andrew Garfield, the actor, recently gave an interview in the past 3 months or so, which I absolutely loved, where he talks about the loss of, I believe it was of his mother. I think he was on the Stephen Colbert show. And Stephen Colbert was like, "Can I ask you about this?" And he kind of reflected what's in my heart as well, where he's like, yes, I would love to talk about my mother, just as I would love to talk about my brother, my brother-in-law, my father. And he said, if I cry, it's only because of the love that I still have for these people, but I don't ever want to not talk about them, essentially. So for me, you know, the love that I have for my brother, my brother-in-law, my dad. That's the thing that then flipped the switch for me that said, you know what? They would not want me to be doing this. They are no longer with us. They would not want me to be carrying on in this manner.
Yes.
They would want me to be doing all of the things that they no longer get to do, that they no longer have the ability to do. So for me, that love persevering now pushes me to say, okay, that's the decision moment. That's where we're like, okay, what is important? What needs to be talked about? What needs to be said to your loved ones, to other people? So the coping, I know that was a long journey.
No,
in my
very
answer.
interesting. Very interesting.
But that was the arc of the journey in several years, from the loss of one individual to another, to my father, and the arc of the external treatment, which didn't help, to a mindset switch of that grief doesn't have to drown you.
Mm.
That grief is your love that still resides, and you can carry on. You can keep that grief close to you as love and carry that as motivation. So that's been now the way that I've processed the loss, is to look at grief not as a weight, but as jet fuel, because that grief is love. That's where I'm now operating out of.
It's beautiful. Seriously, beautiful. Because you're
It took a while.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, not an easy journey by any means.
Yeah.
It never is when there's loved ones you've lost.
Yeah.
Yes. So your renewed purpose now is pushing you, and you've created your podcast.
Yes.
And you've been working on that with your heart for a while now. You launched your podcast at the end of January 22.
Yes.
And It's called 1417 Men's Masterclass. I'm interested to know why it's called 1417.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a nod towards the Renaissance. The Renaissance period was said to have begun in the 14th century and in the mid to late 17th century. So the Renaissance for me has always had a fascination of the idea, Renaissance is French for rebirth. And that at that period of time, it was considered the rebirth of art, of intellect, of the self. The Renaissance didn't abandon its idea of God or religion, but it refocused itself towards humanism, which was the idea that human beings have the potential within themselves through personal development, personal growth, studying the arts, studying ancient Greek literature, which is why I am a huge, passionate reader and follower of Stoic philosophy. Through the study of the classics, you could learn and understand what you needed to become a better, fuller developed human. So 1417 is a nod towards the Renaissance, which I think the idea for me is that men really need to be reborn. We need to take everything we know about, especially Western culture, of the narrative of masculinity and manhood and all of that. We need to be reborn from that to a more fuller, wholehearted self, and really decipher what's true, what's not. So for me, that Renaissance is the biggest ideological push of what I do here.
I absolutely love that. And I'm really excited for the work you are doing in your podcast. And like you say, men do need to open up and speak about their emotions. It's a long time coming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not a sign of weakness. It shows great strength. We No human being was born to be without the use of their emotions and the use of their heart. You do that, you are severely injuring yourself. To deny the use of your heart in your daily life with your loved ones is to injure your personal self. And you can't operate. No, if I broke my arm, I couldn't operate as a healthy individual because I'm not whole. Am I? I can't. I couldn't lift what I need to lift. I couldn't do the work that I need to do. How can I, as a man, expect to live a whole, healthy life if I've injured myself and broken that part of me? And that's where a lot of men operate, whether we realize it or not. And we don't, because the culture of masculinity tells us we're fine. We don't know that that part is injured. And so that's the work is, guys, we need to realize that we are injured and we are hurt and we are not operating out of wholeness, and hurt people hurt people.
Love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. I love your analogy about the broken arm as well. So if you can, visualize that and you can actually work from then, it all makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not as complicated as we make it out to be. Sometimes we put way too many things in there, and we're like, guys, let's strip this down to some bare basic things. It doesn't need to be that complicated. And from there, we can go into the complex. But there's just some basic things we need to get down to.
Excellent. So tell me more about your podcast, because I'm really excited about it.
So we are in season 1 of the podcast, which is just me talking about topics. And I'm actually switching. I missed last week, unfortunately. Been working on some house projects, so I didn't get an episode up this week. Okay. But I'm switching how I do it. Up until this time, I've been fairly scripted. I get really paranoid that I'm going to leave out something important, some, deep thought that I came up with that I'm like, hey guys, let's talk about this. So up until now, I've been fairly scripted. I write it like an essay. I can go back and read it and go, okay, well, that needs to be reworded, or I need to really support the thing that I want to talk about there. So up until this time, I've been fairly scripted, and I came across, probably as I'm reading it off the screen, which is what I'm doing when I record it, which kind of seems a little, rigid, if you will. So this next episode and going further will be me just writing bullet points and then talking as we're talking now, just letting my thoughts really just kind of filter. And if I need to put out another episode because I forgot something, I'll put out another episode later. But right now, season 1, we're talking about, just laying down the basics of what I think we need to, as men, to think about and address. An upcoming episode is going to be about brotherhood, having, real intimate relationships with other men, and what that looks like, because we get really creeped out as guys about the word intimate with other men, because society has put horrible connotations on that of what that mean, of what a guy, so what, we have intimate relationships, heartfelt relationships with other men. This next episode is going to be one that is going to be, I think, some people will like or hate, because as you've probably been seeing in world news, this next episode that I'm going to put out, hopefully it won't be as much of a rant as I think in my head it might sound like. Okay. But it's one that I had slated to do for later on in the season, talking about subject matters that men really need to consider. But in the U.S. right now, we're going through a lot of horrible legislation aimed against the LGBTQ plus community, which is, it's disgusting to see. It's gut-wrenching to watch, especially members of those community go through their own grief and horror of what that might mean to them if that legislation gets passed. So I had scheduled in I'm looking at my wall on the other side of my laptop. I use sticky notes on my wall. I'm so highly organized. It's sticky notes on my wall. I'm looking at all of the episodes, and that was, scheduled to be like weeks out. The topic of social justice and what that means for us as men, and how we should be helping, and what manners we should be helping as a voice or an ally. I think what's going on in my country right now has just pushed the need to put out my voice on what I think that means for anybody that wants to align with the philosophies or the code of 1417 Men's Masterclass. What does that mean? What do we need to be thinking, and why do we think this way? Even in small micro adjustments of what our philosophies are on helping marginalized people.
Yes.
I think a lot of men think these microaggressions, which we don't realize are microaggressions towards marginalized people, because it's been ingrained with us through generations of how we should view marginalized people. And a lot of that has just been taught through the eyes of white men. Mm-hmm. So we need to discuss at this point in time, because there are legislations could actively hurt in severe ways people from the LGBTQ plus community. So now's the time, I think, for that episode to come out. So that's where I'm at. Season 1 is going to be the remainder of that, which I've got about 20 more episode ideas that are going to go out, and probably some more. I don't know, since I'm a first-time podcaster, how many episodes do you do in a season before you take a break? Do you take a break? But season 1 is just going to be laying the foundation. We've talked about a code of ethics, the code of 1417 Men's Masterclass, what we believe, or I believe. I say we, it's just me here. What I believe is 1417 Men's Masterclass. Journaling, we've talked about journaling so far, thought work. So it's season 1 laying the groundwork. Season 2, hopefully by that time, I'll have enough under my belt that I can start doing this. I can start doing interviews where I want to talk to as many men as possible to really get at the idea of what is masculinity? What does manhood mean to you? What does it mean to be a man? Where did you learn about it? How do you feel? How do you understand it now versus when you were younger? So that'll be season 2, and then if we make it to season 3, we'll see where season 3 goes. Hopefully,
you will.
I hope so. Maybe that time will get big enough, and I can get a co-host, and we can get even more guys. And that's really the aim. Is to start changing men's hearts, to get them thinking, and start that train where more men influence more men, and we can really start having these conversations that have happened in fragments in the past. But if we don't take the opportunity that we have now, where the last several years of the pandemic have really cracked people. People have shown the stress, and you could see that all over social media. If we don't take the momentum of people going, why? If we don't take that momentum and start, okay, let's have conversations about why. If we don't take that momentum, just as it happens with anything, it gets swept under the rug. It gets hidden, it gets buried inside of us, and then we move on and we use our coping mechanisms and never solve the problem. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now, is we need to take that momentum of people having that stress and go, okay, let's talk about it.
Absolutely.
Let's deal with that.
And get that ripple effect out there.
Yes.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yes. And just to make sure the listeners get the name of your podcast and where can they find it, please?
Yeah, it's 1417 Men's Masterclass. So that's 1417 Men's Masterclass. You can find me on Instagram. I'm there. Any of my social medias, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook all have, I use the Linktree app. So there's a Linktree that you can click, and it'll bring up all my other social medias that can instantly bounce you to where I'm at, even including podcasting. So just look for me on Instagram. I'm highly active there, or Facebook. Twitter, I'm still getting the hang of how to use Twitter the best to really create conversations. So Instagram is probably the best. Follow the link tree. It'll take you to all my other social media. So that's 1417-1417 Men's Masterclass.
Thank you for that. And what you can do is you can give me a link to your link tree, and I'll put it in the show notes.
Sure.
So everybody can have that as well.
Love to.
So thank you, Juan, for sharing your courageous journey with us today. And by doing so, you have helped so many. Juan Huerta.
Oh, thank you. I hope so.
Definitely. My last question to you is, what is your definition of courage?
That is such an amazing question. Simple in its nature, but very deeply complex. The definition of courage to me is finding love enough for yourself to do big things. I think courage is the greatest act of self-love that you can do. And that's just the heart of it, isn't it? When we look at courage, we don't think we deserve it a lot of times. We operate from brokenness, we operate from trauma, and we tell ourselves that I don't deserve to do this thing that takes courage. Courage to me is a great act of self-love, and finding the love in yourself to go, I need to do that courageous thing. I need that to grow, and that will push me to be a better person. So to me, being courageous is finding that self-love to do big, important things.